Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Prince Automation Destination. So today we are going to start yet another interesting series, that is Git, which is a version control system. But before we move on to discussion on Git, let us try to understand what is version control system from the simple example. So suppose you are working on one file and you want to maintain different history of it, meaning different versions of it. Suppose you started working on one file and you gave it name file underscore version 1 and you added some changes. Then after you modified it and on the next date, suppose you have made some changes and you have converted or you created version 2, likewise version 3, right? And you keep on doing it for multiple versions. But what if there are like multiple files, like 100 times you need to create versions, then that time it will be difficult to maintain the history or to like remember what exactly the file underscore version 1 has the content, right? So in the similar fashion, like we are maintaining the different versions of file, in the similar fashion, we need to maintain the different versions of the code as well. So for that purpose, we have multiple version control systems, such as SVN, Git, Perforce, centralized version control system, right? So Git is one of them, and Git is a distributed version control system, meaning it has one common server as well as local server. What does it mean? So whenever there is some code on the remote server and we take a copy of remote server code, we get the exact copy of it, and anyone can work on this, any tester or any developer can work, and then they can sync with each other. So in this example, for example, there are two users, and both users can take a copy of a remote copy, and then they both will have the same copy. And suppose now user 1 has made some changes, so how user 2 will take the changes? So he will simply push the changes to remote, and then user 2 can take the changes. So this is where Git is used to maintain the code on some central repository, that too in the version format, or that too in the form of history. So it maintains the history as well. So we are going to cover that part today. So let us now try to understand this particular example. So in this case, before we go there, so in this case, remote server means GitHub that we are going to consider, but there can be GitLab, lab, it can be Bitbucket, right? But we are going to cover GitHub, and local server is nothing but our local copy, right? And in order to use Git, first of all, you need to install Git. So in my system, it is already installed, Git hyphen hyphen version, and I'll be sharing the link of same for installation of Git in your system. So once you have Git, then you can use the Git commands. Now I'm going to IntelliJ. So this is one of the recent series that we have worked on, BDD Cucumber, and it is not so far added to any remote repository. For that, what we are going to do, I'm going to simply click on this terminal, which is an integrated terminal. It is similar to CMD. So now, for example, if I'll type in git branch, what it will say? It will say this is not a Git repository, right? As this is not a Git repository, first of all, then what we need to do, we need to type in Git init to make it like a Git repository, right? So now when I will type in Git branch, it will say nothing, because it is able to recognize this is a Git repository, and it didn't throw this error, and it didn't even type the branch name as well. So branch name and all we will be discussing later, but why it didn't show the branch name? Because even though we have added this particular converted this local repository to remote to this Git repository, but there is no communication between remote repository and the local code, right? For that, what we need to do, we need to go to GitHub. Now what I'm going to do, this is my GitHub. I'm going to click on home, then I'm going to click on new, and I'll create one repository, BDD Cucumber, right? Then after, what I will do, I'll click on create repository. So we have created one create repository. So this is what we are going to do next. So what is required, it mentioned that first of all, now you have created one remote repository. Now the next step is to create the connection between this remote repository and the local code, so that our code came here. So for that, what it is suggesting, first of all, you need to type in git init, which is already done. Then it is saying git add. So add is something to add the code, right, to be committed. So commit is to commit the code. So we are going to discuss these things. just now. And then after it is saying git remote add origin. So this is where we are going to make connection between local code and the remote repository. So before we move on, let us try to understand different areas. So by default, whatever we have locally, that is a working directory. So using git add, which we have just looked into, so by using git add, what we can do, we can move our code to one staging area. So there are three kind of areas in git: working directory, which is the local code, and when we perform git add, the code goes to staging, and when we perform git commit, then the code goes to git directory, right? Dot git directory, and then after we can push it from the here from local repository to the remote repository, right? So these are the three areas where the code is maintained, right? Now coming back to this, so we just discussed git add, git commit. So add is to move the code to staging, and then commit is to move the code to the git repository, right? Now first of all, because it said we need to do this, so there is a command git status to track the changes, because in this case what are the changes we have to add every file. So we can either use git add to add a specific file. Let us say I can add pom.xml, right? Or what I can use, I can simply use git add dot, right? So when we type in git status, there are like list of files will appear where the changes are there. So if you'll observe, it is saying pom.xml, src slash means everything under src slash, right? Then testng.xml, correct? But it is not tracking target, test output, correct, and dot idea. So what is the reason for that? For that purpose, that is happening because of this dot git ignore file. So we have added one git ignore file wherein we have added target. So we don't want to track target anytime there is a change, because target usually contains the compiled code, which is of no use on the remote repository. Test output also we don't want to uh, like track, and dot idea file, which is something related to IntelliJ, that also we don't want to track. So git status is to track the changes. So these are the changes, and using git ignore we have ignored target, test output, and this dot idea, right? Now I'm going to use git add dot, right? So when we will add git add dot, but and now I'm going to type in git status. So we will observe, so in the previous git status you were seeing that the code was in red color, which means that the code was in the working directory. Now when we have added it into the like using git add dot, we have added this code into git directory, right, as discussed here, right? So it was previously in working directory. Using git add dot, we added it into staging, and now we are going to add it into the git directory. So now if you will observe, when we typed in git status, it says new file, because these are the new file, and this is for the first time they are getting added. So next time when we will make modification, it will say modified file, so that we will consider in the later videos. Now the next step is git commit, as I mentioned. So if you look at it, so using commit, we will move this code to the git directory, right? Git commit -m, and we are going to simply type in, this is our first commit, so we are going to use git first commit. Now if we will type in git status, it says nothing to commit because the code has been committed to git directory. But so far the code is added locally, into the local database of a local git directory, right? Now the next step is we need to move this code to the remote repository. So how to do this? So we can simply use this particular code, and it is the code of this particular repository. So remote git remote is to point to remote, add is to add this origin to this particular repository. So this is the step where we are going to create a connection between the local repository or local code and the remote repository, right? Now the next step is, if I will type in git status, again we will get the same thing, and now there is a connection. So we will try to now push, because git push is to push the changes of local repository to the remote repository. So when we will type in git push, it says the current branch master has no upstream branch, meaning the branch master is not there. So what we need to do, we need to use git push hyphen set upstream. So this is needed for the first time when we are creating a branch, and the branch is available locally but it is not available on the remote. So when now I will type in git push hyphen hyphen set upstream. So what it will do, it will push this change and it will create master branch on the remote, right? Now if you will observe, so far there is no master branch. When I will refresh, we will be able to see the change has been moved to this particular location, right? So this is how we can add the changes to the, or this is how we can add the repository or the local code to the remote repository. So this is what I wanted to cover as part of this introduction video. Thank you for watching. So we will be covering certain other things in the upcoming videos. Thank you once again. I would request you to please like, share and subscribe. Thank you.